Hello, everyone. My name is Michael, and I'm a Cloud Solutions Architect for Massdriver. In this video, I'll be going over how to make a custom artifact definition to use in Massdriver. Now, you might be wondering what artifact definitions are, or even what artifacts are. Let's briefly cover what they are, why they're useful, and then I'll dive into making one. An artifact is a resource that gets created by a deployment within Massdriver, and that resource adheres to a structural type with validations, such as Postgres authentication. That Postgres authentication type is an artifact definition. Artifact definitions determine which artifacts a bundle produces and what infrastructure or application dependencies a bundle will have. Artifact definitions typically carry metadata like region, policies, authentication, cloud resource identifiers, and they act as a contract to describe artifacts used between two bundles. Now, if you've built your own bundles before, then you're probably familiar with our artifact definitions GitHub repo. That repo contains all of the artifact definitions that we've built, and you can find a link to that repo down in the description. Now, we've built a lot of artifact definitions. We've built artifact types and specs for everyone to use freely. However, you may find yourself wanting to use an artifact definition that does not exist in the repo. Using our Massdriver CLI, we give you the tooling needed to build out your own custom artifact definitions to use with your bundles. Let's jump into building a custom artifact definition. I'll cover the components necessary for every artifact definition and best practices for building out your own custom artifact definition. Now, I've built a custom bundle for this video. It's just a super simple Azure storage account bundle that outputs a connection string and the primary access key. The Massdriver artifacts definition repo does have an artifact definition for a blob storage account. However, it is configured to use RBAC to authenticate, and I'd like to use the connection string and access key. Now, you could start from scratch to build a custom artifact definition if you wanted to, but it's probably easier to copy one similar enough that already exists and just make modifications to it. So let's go into the Massdriver artifact definitions repo and look for a storage account definition. Okay, in this repo, we have the definitions directory, and within the definitions directory, we have artifacts. Now I'm going to look for this list and look through trying to find a storage account blob. Oh, and here we go. Azure storage account blob. Looking through this artifact definition, we can see that there's an endpoint and there's a security block that handles RBAC IAM policies, that kind of thing. Now I'm going to copy this entire file and then I'm going to open it up in VS Code and then I'll make some modifications to it. So let's go ahead and switch over to that now. I'm going to share my VS Code window and make a quick switch. Okay. So I just want to create a new file here and we're going to paste this in. So now I have this artifact definition that's made specifically for RBAC. This will be perfect because I can go ahead and make modifications. We'll go ahead and save this file as Azure Storage Account blob.json. Perfect. Now, before making modifications, I'd like to quickly point out that the required fields, I'd like to quickly point out the required fields to make an artifact definition. This artifact definition file here is the bare bones artifact definition. Every custom artifact definition should be structured like this. The way to look at this file is that the data block should be used for sensitive or confidential data, whether that is connection strings, passwords, IAM policies, basically values that you wouldn't want to appear in the Massdriver UI. And then the specs block is used for values that are not sensitive, such as the API version, the cloud region, things like that. So in order to build out your own custom artifact definition, this is the right starting point for you. Now we'll switch over to the artifact definition that I want to use, and I want to make some modifications to it. So let's go through. I know that since I am not using RBAC, I can remove any references to security. And we'll just fix this alignment, and then I'll remove this block here. So we remove the security block. I want to rename the endpoint to connection string. And we'll call this connection string. And then the SAS token, I can rename to primary access key. Just copy and paste that. And then I'll update this title to primary access key. Okay, so for the Azure Resource ID right here, this field is referencing an artifact type. If I publish my definition as is, it's going to error out because the type is actually not local to me. It's just referencing another JSON file. Now, the easiest way to modify this is to write out the reference manually. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly go into the artifact definitions repo, and I'll show you guys what I'm doing here. We're going to find the Azure Resource ID type, copy the contents, and then we're going to bring it into my artifact definition. So we'll go ahead and switch over to the repo again. And then within the repo, I'm just going to scroll down and we're going to look for types. So these are the artifact types. So artifact types just really set a specific type of constraint within a smaller field. All I need here is the type through the message. We're going to copy that over, and then I'll go ahead and switch back to my VS Code. Okay, so I'm just going to replace this reference for the Azure Resource ID with the actual contents of what that ID is. And now what we have is the manually filled out contents for that artifact type. For the connection string, I just need to make a new type since that connection string type doesn't actually exist, and it's pretty easy to make one. All I really need to do is just replace this with a title. We'll call it connection string. We'll set the type to string, and we'll set the description connection string the storage account. That's really all we need to do for that. I can even add an example if I wanted to, like we can see here in the Azure Resource ID. And then the last thing that we need to fix within this file is the specs. Now, I'm going to do the same thing here, like I did with the Azure Resource ID. I'm just going to copy the definition type contents. And what we're going to find in the repo, if we go look, is that the spec is referencing an Azure region type. So instead of switching screens back and forth, I'm just going to quickly go ahead and grab that information, and then we will paste it right into the custom artifact definition. So I'll go ahead and grab the spec, and what we're going to see here now is that reference to the Azure region type. And now I can go back into the repo, go to the Azure region type. Where's that Azure region type? And I'm going to select the type through the description, and then we'll switch back. We'll replace this ref with what that type really is. So what this spec is doing is it's declaring that we are using an Azure cloud. And so those specs are coming through with Azure specific information. And then within that Azure object is the region. So we're pulling the region of where the storage account is being deployed to in case we need to use it for downstream resources. Okay, so that's all we really need for our artifact definition. The rest is filled out. I do need to switch my access level to private because when publishing your custom artifact definitions, we don't typically want them to be public. That would enable other users from being able to see, use, interact with our artifact definitions. So what we want to do is we want to set that to private, so only we can use that exclusively. And now I just need to go ahead and open up my terminal. Go ahead and make a new terminal. I'll set some environment variables. And then what I need to do now is run a command called mass definition publish. So it's going to look like this: mass definition publish, and then /-f. So I'm setting my file path, and then we're going to type in Azure, and it should Azure. Yep, here we go. Azure storage account blob.json. And if I hit enter, definition published successfully. So now what I can do is I can run mass definition get, and then I'm just going to type in Lacor. Lacor is the name of my personal org / Azure storage account blob. And there we have that definition being generated for us. That's being pulled from Massdriver. So let's go ahead and switch to my bundle. I'm going to go ahead and switch to my Azure storage account bundle. Now, this is the bundle, again, the super simple bundle that I've built for this video that is just using a standard storage account, and we're outputting the connection string and the primary access key. So I've created the artifact definition and I published it. Now what I need to do, and I've already done this, but I need to set up this Massdriver artifact resource. Setting up this Massdriver artifact resource allows me to output information from the deployment into the artifact definition. And that way my downstream resources can have access to that. So I've set the field to Azure Storage Account Blob, which is identical to the name that I gave in my definition. Same with the actual name of the resource. And then as you can see here, I'm just referencing the connection string. Again, within the infrastructure block of the custom artifact definition, I'm using connection_string, and I'm using the same thing here. Within the authentication block of the definition, we're setting primary access key, and then we're just referencing that value. And then as you can see within the specs block, we have the Azure block added in there. And then within Azure, we are grabbing the region from my resource group. And we're grabbing the region from my resource group and not my storage account because it's the same, right? I'm adding the region to my resource group, and then I'm pulling that region into my storage account. So the main change that I need to make sure that I do, besides adding in the artifact resource and making sure that's structured the same way my custom artifact definition is I need to go in my massdriver.yaml file, and I need to add this artifact. So this artifact essentially allows me to select the definition that I want to use in tandem with my Massdriver Terraform resource of the artifact. So again, same name, Azure Storage Account Blob, Azure Storage Account Blob, and now I'm refing my Lacor org / Azure Storage Account Blob. So by configuring it this way, I know exactly what the artifact is outputting, and then any downstream resources can look for this artifact definition so that contract can be made on both ends of the connection. So once that's set there, I should be able to run mass bundle publish. So we're going to set those environment variables again, mass bundle publish. And now my bundle is published. So let me go ahead and switch to Massdriver here. And then we're just going to add the screen. Okay, so here's Massdriver. Now I have my Azure Virtual Network up and running, my Azure Kubernetes cluster, and then I have a dummy application that's waiting to be deployed. Now it's connected to Kubernetes, but I also have another dependency for Azure Storage Account Blob that has not been fulfilled. So open up the bundle catalog. I already have search for Azure Storage. We'll just type in storage account, and then we're going to look for Azure Storage account blob. I'll drag this out. We'll type in blob, and then blob using connection string and access key. Now we're going to click submit. And then this adds the resource to the canvas. I can drag and drop, make that connection so my application can get the connection string. The region, I'll go ahead and select a region and click deploy. Now this is just going to take a minute to deploy, and then it'll come up. And we're just going to go ahead and wait for that to come up here. So I went ahead and paused the recording while we were waiting for the storage account to come up. It only took a minute, but as we can see, it's now complete. So now if I hover over this resource, I do see that artifact definition has been created. In fact, I can go in here and once I refresh the page, I should be able to download this artifact definition. And there it is right here. I can download that definition as a JSON object. And we're going to see those values of the definition come through. I'll go ahead and open that up. And then I will share that screen as well. Okay, so as we can see, this is the essential JSON object that gets created by creating the artifact definition resource. It's mapped out the way I need, and then now my application can consume these credentials to authenticate to my storage account and start doing what it needs to do. Okay, thank you for joining me. This was wonderful. If you're interested in learning more about Massdriver, please check out massdriver.cloud. Hope to see you in the next video.